Osyp is mulliganing to 6, so let's see if he can find a hand that he is happy with. But this match is going to be Rudy Briksza on Black-White Angel Control against Osyp Lebedowicz on Green-White Tokens.
I know that when I faced this matchup, and you can actually see a super sick game of me playing from last weekend in our coverage archive. I don't want to spoil it, but it might have been the coolest game of the whole tournament, even though I lost. But I thought that I would be favored against this Black-White Angel Control deck, but the more that I see this Black-White Angel Control deck get played, the more I have to give it a bit more respect. And I think that this is probably a pretty even matchup. It might even be a little favored for the Black-White Control deck, and it looks like Osyp might actually be mulliganing again, which is going to bode quite poorly for him.
Yeah, going down to 5 is not where you want to be. It might be a little offset if he's on the play or the draw. Getting the scry helps, but having 2 less resources in your starting hand than your opponent is real rough.
Yeah, one thing worth noting is when I played against the Black-White Angel Control deck, one of the things that gave me a lot of game was I was able to flip my Westvale Abbey and I had a Gideon emblem out. So my Ormondal actually beat my opponent's melded Bruna and Gisela in combat, which was quite relevant. And I actually needed both of my Westvale Abbeys. But here, one of the interesting deck building choices that Osyp has taken is he actually only has one Westvale Abbey, and I'll be curious to see if that ends up mattering or not.
Well, looks like he is going to keep his 5. Let's see what he decides to do with his scry. Osyp is going to put his scry onto the bottom. Looks like he's on the play, so he's going to start out with a tapped fortified village, and Rudy just has a swamp and passing the turn back. Let's see if Osyp has a 2-drop here.
And despite this green-white deck being a bit of a mid-range deck, it does have the potential to have some very powerful starts that can run away with the game. I would love to see like a Nissa Vastwood Seer into a Gideon. Unfortunately, it doesn't look like Osyp is going to have access to that.
All right, so Osyp is going to play an Oath of Nissa on his 2nd turn after playing a fortified village, or for his 3rd turn. He did find a Nissa Vastwood Seer. He has a forest and a pass. Rudy is going to read the bones. He's going to fall down to 18. He's going to scry 2, draw 2. He's going to bottom top and then draw 2 cards. Pass the turn back to Osyp. Now Osyp does have that Nissa he can deploy here.
And Rudy does have to discard before he passes back. This is one of the annoying things about having Read the Bones in your deck is if you're on the draw and you don't have a 2-mana removal spell, you end up having to discard on turn 3.
All right. Well, even though Osyp did mulligan to 5, he has his first 4 land drops and a Gideon ally of Zendikar on turn 4. That's going to bring along with it a 2/2 Knight ally token.
Yeah, and this is some decent pressure that's going to be difficult for Rudy to answer. Normally, the green-white tokens deck can just run the black-white control deck out of answers, but Rudy, because a lot more of his top end comes in the form of creatures, he's going to be able to ignore a lot of these tokens.
Well, Rudy will fall to 17 to cast his Kalidas and pass the turn back to Osyp. Osyp has a 5th land, a Declaration in Stone that's going to take care of that Kalidas Trader of Get, and he can play his Nissa Vastwood Seer, or Voice of Zendikar. So he's going to plus it, get an 0/1 plant, plus his Gideon, crash in for 7. That's going to knock Rudy all the way down to 10. And despite mulliganing to 5, Osyp has a very good start.
Yeah, Osyp can actually kill Rudy on the following turn. All he needs to do is activate his Gideon and then minus his Nissa, and he has 10 power worth of attackers.
We have something like a Dromoka's Command here. This game could be over already.
If we have a Dromoka's Command or another Declaration of Stone, Osyp could just steal this game despite having mulliganed all the way down to 5. And this is one of the great things about the green-white tokens deck is it's so good in the late game. It has a lot of card advantage, a lot of great mid-range elements, but it does have the potential to pose some difficult threats that can close out the game very quickly.
All right, well, Rudy is going to play that Thalia's Lancers and go fetch out a Gisela, the Broken Blade from his deck. Pass the turn back to Osyp. Let's see if Osyp has a way to end this game.
I know Osyp, and if he had it, he would just fire it off real fast. So if he's not doing it right away, it probably means that he's unable to. That said, he still has some good attacks here. He could just plus his Gideon and bash in for 5, and there's not much that Rudy could actually do about it. And ultimating a Nissa is also a great way to catch up after a mulligan. You know, so far Osyp has hit all of his land drops. It would take a little while to ultimate the Nissa, and he does have to worry about cards like Ruinous Path, Anguish Unmaking, or a potential Gisela attacking the Nissa. But if the minus ability of Nissa isn't particularly profitable, that may be something that he just ends up going for.
And well, Osyp does have 5 lands here. A Nissa Vastwood Seer with 4 counters on it. A Gideon Ally of Zendikar with 5 counters on it. A 2/2 Knight Ally and an 0/1 plant, along with that Oath of Nissa. Looks like he's doing a little bit of math, trying to figure out how best to extract value out of this turn, getting as much damage as possible, and limiting Rudy's plays for the following turn. Let's see here.
If he just has another creature, he may consider playing another creature and then minusing the Nissa anyway, just so that he puts more power and toughness onto the table. So I think that's what he's trying to think about now. He knows that Giselle is coming up, and so he's trying to figure out a way to push through it on the following turn. He kind of has this Thalia's Lancers pinned, meaning that Rudy can't really afford to use the Thalia's Lancer to attack the Planeswalkers, even if Rudy's able to find a removal spell for this Sylvan Advocate, because it means that the Thalia wouldn't be able to play defense on the following turn.
Right, so Osyp is going to play a Sylvan Advocate that's a 4/5. He's going to plus his Gideon to make it into a 5/5 creature, and we're going to get some +1/+1 counters on all of his creatures. That's going to grow the Gideon up to a 6/6 and the Sylvan Advocate to a 5/6. So we're going to have all of the creatures that can attack enter the battlefield or enter the red zone. Thalia's Lancers will block the Knight Ally token, and 6 from a Gideon, 1 from a plant is going to come through. It's going to knock Rudy down to 3. Rudy is going to play a Sorin on his turn, and then just -6 it to deal 6 points of damage to Osyp's Gideon and gain 6 life. Now that Gideon did only have 5 counters on it, so he did only have to do 5 points of damage to the Gideon to get rid of it.
It had 6. It had attacked twice.
Oh, it did have 6? Okay.
Yeah.
My bad.
But yeah, that was a great play for Rudy. He really needed a way to stabilize his life total. I'm not exactly sure, but I think he might actually have a Linvala in his hand, which is going to do some really solid work. So Osyp had a window where if he had the right top deck, he probably would have been able to win on the spot. But I think from here it's going to become a lot more difficult, especially because Osyp's essentially in top deck mode.
All right, well, Osyp has already drawn for his turn. Let's see what he decides to do with this turn. That 5/6 Sylvan Advocate can still put on a lot of pressure.
Yeah. A Dramoka's Command would win the game for Osyp because he would be able to add a +1/+1 counter on his Sylvan Advocate and then minus his Nissa to push through 9 damage. But unfortunately, he does not have access to that. And if he can't keep adding power and toughness onto the board, it's...
Ooh, well, here is another Gideon right
So
off
that's
the
pretty
top
good.
for Osyp.
Yep.
This is going to bring about a Knight Ally token.
And unfortunately for Osyp, this is going to mean that Rudy can play the Linvala and get full value from it on the following turn. But it is most certainly the best thing that Osyp can do. And Osyp is going to be threatening a very powerful attack on the following turn.
Right. Well, Sylvan Advocate is going to come in for 5. That is going to drop Rudy down to 4. He'll plus his Nissa and make another 0/1 plant. Rudy's going to play a Linvala the Preserver, get full value, gaining that 5 life back up to 9, and bringing it along an additional 3/3 Flying Angel with the 5/5, and pass the turn back to Osyp.
And Osyp still, you know, with the Dramoka's Command, he could probably take this game, but he really needs to draw something that can interact here. The green-white deck, it doesn't play a whole lot of interaction because generally speaking, it doesn't need a whole lot. You know, an Avacyn might allow for a fairly profitable attack. He can plus his Gideon and minus his Nissa and present quite frankly, a lot of power and toughness. But he's got to be pretty worried because he knows that Rudy has that Bruna. So if that Linvala dies in combat, Rudy can potentially just cast Bruna and get Linvala back on the following turn. So
well, Rudy went and got Gisela. With,
Gisela. Okay, excuse me.
Lancers. So thankfully, we don't know if he has Bruna or not. It'd be real good if he did.
Yeah. And we can see that Rudy actually has a language in his deck. That's one of the things that I found interesting about this Black-White Angel control deck is a lot of its cards are fairly counter-synergistic. And we can see here that if Rudy cast Languish, it would hurt his side of the board a ton, and it would barely touch Osip's side of the board.
All right, so Gideon is going to plus. And this is going to minus, which will put a counter on all of his creatures. This is going to grow Gideon up to a 6/6. Sylvan Advocate is going to be huge as a 5/7. And it looks like Osip is just going to attack with the Gideon and the Sylvan Advocate and leave the Night Ally and the 2 plants back on defensive duty.
Man, if Osyp had drawn a Dramoka's Command, that might have opened up a lethal attack. If Osyp had drawn an Archangel Avacyn, he probably would have been able to attack with everything. A Declaration in Stone would have also been a great attack, but he hasn't quite been able to get any of the things that he really needs. All right, looks like Osyp is going in with everything. And this is definitely worth it, in my opinion. I haven't done all the math, but let's see, so that lets 6, 7 go through, putting Rudy to 9, and Rudy's essentially trading 2 of his tokens for 1 of Rudy's tokens, but along with it, a bunch of damage.
All right, so Rudy is going to fall down to 2. He will lose a 3/3 Angel, and Osip is going to lose a Night Ally and a plant token. That's going to leave behind 1 plant token with a counter on it, a Sylvan Advocate with 2 counters on it, and Gideon has 1 counter on it. Osip's just going to pass the turn back to Rudy.
So Grasp of Darkness is a pretty big draw for Rudy. He also has a Shambling Vent, which he can use inside of combat.
All right, so he will cast a Duress. We didn't quite see what Osip revealed. Looks like it was just a land. He's going to be able to kill Gideon with Linvala. He can play Gisela here, which is a lifelinker with first strike. It's very important. And still hold up Grasp of Darkness. So Rudy might be turning this around.
Yeah, with a Declaration in Stone, Osip could knock Rudy down to 1, but 1 is not none, and Rudy's probably going to be able to claw his way back into the game from here. This Gisela is going to buffer his life total. Rudy's way ahead on resources, and Osip's going to have a hard time winning from this position. He does have the potential to draw Evolutionary Leap, which can generate a lot of card advantage, and he also has Tragic Arrogance in his deck, which could potentially flip things around.
All right. Well, Osip is going to just draw a few lands over the course of a couple of turns while Rudy adds to his board with Angels. And Osip's going to scoop that up. So he came out pretty fast on that mulligan to 5, but was not able to close the gap, more than likely just because of the missing 2 cards that he had at the start. So let's take a look at our players' sideboards and see how we think they're going to change their deck up. So Rudy has 1 Anguished Unmaking, 1 Felidar Cub, 1 Tragic Arrogance, 2 Planar Outburst, 1 Hallowed Moonlight, 1 Guiltleaf Winnower, 1 Bruna the Fading Light, 3 Transgress the Mind, 2 Deadweight, 1 Liliana the Last Hope, and 1 Emrakul the Promised End. How do we think Rudy's going to sideboard?
So I think the cards that Rudy wants are the ones that fight Osip's sources of card advantage in his Planeswalkers. Specifically, Anguish Unmaking and Transgress the Mind are some of the best ways to fight the Planeswalkers. I think that Emrakul can be a way that he can go over the top, as well as he may decide that he wants an extra copy of Bruna, because melding it is something that isn't too difficult to do, considering the green-white tokens deck is so light on removal.
All right, now on Osip's side, looks like we have 2 Tireless Tracker, 2 Stasis Snare, a Clip Wings, an Aerial Volley, 2 Lambholt Pacifist, 2 Declaration in Stone, 2 Linvala the Preserver, 2 Nissa Vastwood Seer, and 1 Quarantine Field. How do we think Osip's going to side?
So I like a lot of the sources of card advantage, like Tireless Tracker and Nissa of Vaswoodseer. I also like Quarantine Field quite a bit. That's something that can deal with a Gisela and Bruna if they meld. Some people like Lambhole Pacifists against control decks. I don't. Osyp might be one of those people. I'm not 100% sure. And then he could consider also Stasis Snare to have a little bit more removal against things like Gisela and Kalidas. If he wants to keep in his Tragic Arrogances, which you can make an argument for, then he probably doesn't want too much enchantment-based removal.
All right, well, that does make a lot of sense. I'm interested to see how these players side and how things go in the next game. But in the meantime, while they finish up shuffling, I just want to tell you guys about the cool weekly sale that we have going on at StarCityGames.com on full art basic lands. So it does end Monday at 10:59 a.m. If you're looking for Zendikar, Battle for Zendikar, unhinged, unglued, foil, or non-foil versions of these full art basic lands, make sure you head over to the StarCityGames.com weekly sale to save on select full art basic lands. It ends Monday, 10:59 a.m. Make sure you get them before they're gone.
You know, I actually think there's a couple different ways that Osyp can sideboard against Rudy's deck. It'll be interesting to see what exactly he does, and also to see what exactly he takes out. Like, I'm curious to see if he still has Evolutionary Leap in his deck. There's arguments for and against it. I like Evolutionary Leap against control decks in general, but when the control deck is good at putting pressure back on you, and Rudy's deck is, sometimes Evolutionary Leap can be a little lackluster, a little slow, a little unimpactful on the board.
And well, Osyp is going to start off with the Canopy Vista. He's going to cast Oath of Nissa on turn 2, find a basic plains. Let's see if he has a land to follow up. Rudy has a Forsaken Sanctuary.
I'm also curious to see if Osyp still has Tragic Arrogance in his deck. That is a card that, you know, it can save Osyp from some pretty dire situations. Can be an answer to Bruna and Gisela, but it's not something that you usually want to have against control decks.
All right, well, Osyp has a Westvale Abbey and an Evolutionary Leap. On Rudy's turn, he's going to play a Caves of Kolios and a Transgress the Mind. So it looks like we have a Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, Nissa Vaswoodseer, Sylvan Advocate, and another Evolutionary Leap. So he does only have one green source. That's going to be the big point of contention here.
Well, he does have the Nissa, which is going to be able to get another, and right on time, for sure.
All right, well, Nissa Vaswoodseer is going to come down, find a forest for Osyp, and he will play that for his turn. Let's see how Rudy decides to navigate this fourth turn. Looks like he's just going to pass the turn. He may do something in Osyp's upkeep. Looks like he's going to use that Grasp of Darkness. Osyp will sacrifice Nissa to Evolutionary Leap and get a Hangerback Walker, and he will draw for the turn. Here's an Oath of Nissa. That's going to let him look at the top 3, maybe find another land. He will find a Canopy Vista.
And that will come into play untapped, which is pretty valuable. He could consider playing his Hangerback Walker or Sylvan Advocate. I think I like playing the Hangerback Walker a little bit more, just because it lets you keep a green mana open for that Evolutionary Leap.
All right, well, Hangerback Walker is going to come down for 1. Rudy has a copy of Gyre Reach Sanitarium, so that's going to give him a legendary land. And he will fall to 19 to play Thalia's Lancers. Let's see what he decides to go and get with it.
And this is one of the reasons why I am unsure about Evolutionary Leap in the matchup. And that's because while Evolutionary Leap is incrementally generating card advantage, it does it in kind of a clunky way. And when you're up against a deck that's going to put some counter pressure on you, and Rudy, you know, seems to be doing so in this situation, the Evolutionary Leap can just be a little too slow.
Well, Hangerback Walker will leap into another Hangerback Walker. He will cast 1 for 2 and attack for 1 with a Thopter. All right, well, here comes the Kalidas, and that's going to shut off any value from Hangerback Walkers. I think that Osyp is going to leap his 2 counter walker into
yeah, and
like
I
an
believe
Archangel
that
Avacyn in response. That will
Osyp
give
did that in response.
Yep, so that will give him 2 Thopters.
And what's nice about this is Osyp is developing a little bit of an Air Force because he can't make any headway on the ground. But, I mean, he's only attacking for 3, and Rudy has 7 power worth of attackers on the board, 3 of which is lifelink. So Osip's going to be pretty far behind in the race, and this evolutionary leap, while it's a good source of card advantage, it's really slow.
Right. Rudy does get in for 4 with his Thalia's Lancers. That's going to drop Osyp down to 16. Let's see what he wants to do on this turn. He did find a copy of Archangel Avacyn from that last evolutionary leap activation that could play a pretty big role in ambushing one of Rudy's attackers and stabilizing this board.
Yeah, Avacyn's a great card. In this kind of matchup, I usually don't use it as a way to try to ambush attackers because the black-white deck has so many removal spells. I find a lot of times it's better to just try to play in a way where my opponent thinks that I don't have it, so that I can potentially use it end of turn to snipe a planeswalker or get in some good damage.
Right, well, Osyp is going to get in for 1. It's going to knock Rudy down to 17 from that Thopter attack. A Sylvan Advocate will come down just as a 2/3. Does not have a 6th land yet.
And what's nice about the board state for Osyp is that he can potentially block both of Rudy's creatures and sack both of them to Evolutionary Leap, meaning that Rudy wouldn't deal any damage to Osyp, and he wouldn't gain any life.
All right, he will pass the turn back.
And when those tokens die, they do not cause the Kalitas to trigger and generate the zombie tokens, so that's also another nice thing for Osyp. I still think he's pretty far behind in this game, but he's certainly doing what he can to battle back.
Right. Well, Rudy is going to draw for his turn and send all of his creatures into the red zone.
And we see Rudy with Languish in his hand again, too, which is pretty awkward. Fortunately, he has these powerful creatures, but the Languish is certainly not a card that's going to do anything in his hand for a while.
All right.
Tragic Arrogance, on the other hand, that's a man's card. I can get behind that.
Nope, a Thopter is going to block Kalitas, and then and then Evolutionary Leap into another Archangel Avacyn. Osyp will take 4 damage from the Thalia's Lancers and fall down to 12. Post-combat, Rudy is going to play a Gisela the Broken Blade and pass the turn back to Osyp.
And because this deck has so many ways to gain life, it has the Shambling Vents, Kalitas, and Gisela that all have lifelink. He's got Sorin that can also give him a good burst of life, as well as Linvala. That's one of the ways that this deck is able to have such a clunky curve and not get run over, is because it can stabilize at a very, very low life total and then start battling back with these lifelinkers.
And it looks like Osyp has not found his 6th land, so he's being constricted to only playing 1 spell a turn or a spell and activating this Evolutionary Leap. He's just going to discard an Evolutionary Leap on his end step.
And from here, it's pretty clear to Rudy that Osyp is probably representing Archangel Avacyn. He's seen Osyp get one with an Evolutionary Leap, and now he knows that he's going to play it.
All right. Well, Osyp is going to flash in that Archangel Avacyn, and Rudy has a Grasp of Darkness to take care of it. That's going to give Rudy a 2/2 zombie. And then the 3 creatures are going to block the three creatures. They're indestructible, so no damage is going to get through, but Rudy's still going to gain 7 life.
Yeah, if I were Osyp, I would have liked to have seen him gang block the Kalitas. He would have taken 8 damage, but at least he would have gotten that Kalitas off the board.
Looks like Rudy also has Emrakul the Promised End in his hand.
Yeah, I mean, Osyp, this Evolutionary Leap hasn't really done a whole lot for him, and Rudy is just playing these big, powerful cards that Osyp has a hard time contending with. And, Osyp really hasn't gotten any Planeswalkers to stick. He doesn't have a 6th land to make his Sylvan Advocate become a 4/5. He could maybe use a card like Tragic Arrogance to kind of get him out of this tough spot, but Rudy seems to be more or less running away with this game.
Right, well, Sylvan Advocate is going to get in for 2, and Rudy is going to use Gaia Reach Sanitarium on Osyp's end step to make each player draw a card and discard a card. He's going to discard Thalia's Lancers. I guess he thinks that he's not going to be casting it, and it's going to put a creature into his graveyard to help build towards casting Emrakul, the Promised End.
Yeah, I'm surprised that Rudy doesn't discard the Languish. He has the Tragic Arrogance in case, something goes wrong. So I would imagine he would prefer to just continue building up his threats.
Looks like he's just going to cast Tragic Arrogance
now. So this is a bit of an interesting play. I would have preferred to go to combat, make Osyp cast the Avacyn, and then cast the Tragic Arrogance post-combat, if you were going to cast it at all. Rudy could have also just continued building up his board by casting that other Lancer, getting a Bruna, and then just casting it on one of the following turns. You'll need one more land drop.
He does have another transform card in his hand, so it could be Bruna, and he has another land. So if that is Bruna in his hand, he can meld them next turn.
Yeah, here it's a little dicey, though.
Well, Osyp is going to play an Archangel Avacyn on Rudy's end step, and because the Sylvan Advocate died, Rudy did get a 2/2 zombie.
Yeah, so with another land drop, Rudy could sacrifice his zombie to make his Cletus bigger and then get some use out of Languish, but that may not work.
We're just going to see a Declaration in Stone. It's going to hit Cletus. Rudy will get a clue for his troubles.
So I think if I were Osyp, I would prefer to cast the Gideon. It's very unlikely that it's going to die, and it's just a great card to have on the board that's going to generate value over time. If Osyp is specifically worried about a sweeper, Hangerback Walker is an okay play too, but Gideon does just as much against it.
Yeah, it looks like it is a Bruna, so we are going to get a Briksza melded here. Osyp does have that Gideon and is going to pass, but Rudy is going to make a 9/10 Flying Vigilance Lifelink creature. Flying First Strike Vigilance Lifelink, and your opponent can't cast spells that convert a mana cost 3 or less.
Yeah, and the green-white tokens deck really doesn't have a good way to deal with it. When I played the deck, I was able to flip my Westvale Abbey to create Ormondal, and I had a Gideon emblem so that my Ormondal beat Briksza in combat. Osyp only has one Westvale Abbey. He does have it out, but he's going to need to do a lot of work in order to generate the needed tokens. It looks like he actually might have Quarantine Field, though. Oh, and this is huge if that is Quarantine Field. Because with this, he'll be able to exile Briksza, end the zombie. He might even choose to exile
the clue.
Yeah, but he's going to go. So that's basically a 3-for-1. And now Osyp gets to bash in for a ton of damage. And now Rudy is really on the ropes.
Yeah, so we're going to attack in for 9, 10, 12 damage and put Rudy down to 3.
And Osyp could have zeroed a Hangerback Walker.
And he is going to zero the Hangerback Walker, and that will kill Rudy.
Wow, unbelievable. I have to imagine that maybe Rudy misplaced the use of Tragic Arrogance in that situation, but good on Osyp for just hanging in there and playing to his outs, and he navigated those last 2 turns perfectly.
Yeah, I think he just overvalued Briksza, I guess. To be fair, there isn't a lot of answers for it.
There's not a lot of answers. In my deck, I play 2 Quarantine Fields, so if Rudy, looked at my deck, maybe that would be on his radar. Also, the green-white tokens decks frequently have Tragic Arrogance, which can be problematic. I mean, if Osyp had cast Tragic Arrogance and made Rudy keep the zombie, that would have been problematic too. So the green-white deck has a hard time with Briksza, but it's got a few things that it can do.
All right, well, I don't think that either player is going to change up their plan very much. So while everybody is finishing shuffling up, let's learn a little bit more about the SCG Regionals that's coming up. Take a look at this, and we'll be right back.
Don't miss the StarCityGames.com Regional Championships. On August 6th, play Standard at one of the many regional locations across the US and Canada. The first 200 players to register for each event will receive a Hot Pursuit playmat and token just for signing up. Regional championships are part of the SCG Tour with SCG points for all players. Champions will earn an exclusive trophy, and all top 8 competitors will receive a playmat, pin, share of $5,000, and a spot in an upcoming SCG Invitational. Visit go.starcitygames.com/regionals to learn more.
Welcome back. For those of you just now joining us, we're going into Game 3 of Rudy Briksza on Black-White Angel Control against Osyp Lebedowicz on Green-White Tokens. The StarCityGames.com Baltimore Open, brought to you by Ultimate Guard. Looks like our players are done shuffling. Let's take a look and see if they keep their opening 7. Rudy will be on the play of this game. Looks like both players are happy with their starting 7, and Rudy will start off with a Forsaken Sanctuary, tapped. Osyp will have a tapped Fortified Village, a Shambling Vents for Rudy, and a pass back. Osyp is going to play a Fortified Village, revealing a Forest and a Hangerback Walk.
And so this might be a hand where Osyp is curving out quite well. We'll see what he has.
Rudy is going to play a Swamp and a Transgress the Mind. He's going to take the Archangel Avacyn. We see 2 Oath of Nissa, a Forest, a Westvale Abbey, and a Nissa Vastwood Seer.
Now this is where Osyp just rips Nissa, Voice of Zendikar, and then Gideon's Ally of Zendikar right off the top. Ooh,
Looks like he's going to Oath of Nissa instead of Nissa Vastwood Seer.
Yeah, I would definitely like to see the Nissa Vastwood Seer.
Well, there is a Gideon. He's going to set up his play for next turn. Going this route, though, does allow you to level up your Hangerback Walker, which might be valuable. I wonder if Osyp went back and actually took out those Evolutionary Leap.
Yeah, I would. I know my general rule in the previous season was whenever I played against black-white control decks, I would have my Evolutionary Leaps, but when I played against black-green control decks, where their only creature was Sylvan Advocate Tireless Tracker, I would take out my Evolutionary Leaps.
All right, well, Osyp is going to level his Hangerback Walker and pass the turn. Rudy will just play a land for his turn and just jam Gisela the Broken Blade. So he does have a 4/3 flying first strike lifelink angel.
So I think what I would do if I were Osyp is I would play Gideon and just make an emblem. It's not the greatest turn, but an emblem in this matchup does a lot of good work. It means that your Avacyns can't get tagged by Grasp in Darkness. It means that your Avacyn will beat Gisela inside of combat, as well as Thalia's Lancers. And also it just makes all of your tokens and every other creature you draw from that point onward more powerful. So I like that Osyp's making a Gideon here because it just makes it so that so many more things in the future can operate in a more advantageous way.
Osyp is going to make a Gideon emblem and pass. Rudy will attack for 4 and Transgress the Mind, snagging another copy of Archangel Avacyn out of Osyp's hand, leaving him with a Declaration in Stone, Oath of Nissa, Forest, and Nissa Voice of Zendikar, or Nissa Vastwood Seer. He will Declaration in Stone the Gisela. It's going to give Rudy a clue, but Osyp will also be able to cast another Oath of Nissa, see if he can find some action. There's another Gideon.
Nice. And this is what Osyp wants to do, just wants to keep presenting threats. And he does have some stuff that Rudy can do that he needs answers for, like Gisela. And we'll see how those things end up lining up.
All right. Well, Rudy is going to sacrifice his clue on Osyp's end step. Osyp will level that Hangerback Walker up to 3. It is a 4/4 because of the Gideon emblem. Rudy will play his 6th land and tap out for a Sorin Grim Nemesis. He's going to plus it and reveal a Swamp off of the top. He also has Planar Outburst in hand, so he's likely going to try and set up a turn where he can kill the Hangerback Walker and then Planar Outburst away the tokens that it leaves behind.
Yeah, I do agree with that. Hopefully, yeah. So 2 other things that are going on now that are kind of cool are Osyp is going to be able to play Nissa next turn and flip it in the same turn, which is quite nice. The other thing that is kind of nice about this is once he starts to flat out, Westvale Abbey will be making 2/2 tokens instead, which is pretty powerful.
All right. So Hangerback Walker is going to attack Sorin for 4 and knock it down to 3. Osyp is going to play another Gideon Ally of Zendikar and make a 2/2 Knight Ally token. Rudy will plus his Sorin, and that's going to deal 3 damage and gain him 3 life.
Well, it's loss of life, which is notable because otherwise it could be
Yeah.
redirected to the Gideon.
Loss of life. And then just going to play his Gisela, the Broken Blade. And he still has a murder back. So here he may be able to set up a line of play where he gets to murder the Hangerback Walker and then Planar Outburst next turn. He also has Emrakul the Promised End in his hand. So we got an endgame if we get there.
So this is a little interesting. Osyp is playing the Nissa into the murder. He could potentially try to, pick a better spot for Nissa after the murder is cast. But we'll see if...
Ooh, this Declaration Stone is going to be huge.
Yeah.
That means Osyp is going to be able to kill that Sorin.
So if I were Osyp, I would send the Gideon at Sorin, and I think I'd send everything else at Rudy. You'd have to worry about Anguished Unmaking, killing your Gideon, but that would be the only thing that would do it. Grasp of Darkness wouldn't kill the Gideon, it would just reduce the damage. And
so it looks like Rudy is going to take the damage from the Hangerback Walker and then murder?
Yeah, I'm not exactly sure. I'm sure our life totals will tell the whole story. But this will deal with the Nissa and the tokens, and we'll have a board that is just Gideon facing down this 4/4 land.
All right, so Rudy is going to Planar Outburst. With Awaken, it's going to turn that Caves of Kolios into a 4/4.
And considering Rudy's life total didn't change, it might have been that Osyp just sent everything at the Sorin. That might have been another possibility. It's a little unclear to me at this particular moment.
It is possible. All right, well, Gideon is going to 0 and make a Knight Ally token, and then pass the turn. I wonder how close we are to casting Emrakul.
Yeah, Emrakul's going to be a
him.
problem. Oh, he also got an Anguish Unmaking, which is great.
So the clue from Rudy is going to give him an Anguished Unmaking. Osyp might just use Westfell Abbey and ambush this 4/4.
Yeah, he can make a Cleric, which will be a 2/2, and then the 2/2 and 3/3 Knight, because of the Gideon emblem, can potentially block and force a reaction out of Rudy.
Yeah. If Rudy needs this 9th land to cast Emrakul, this might be a pretty big misstep. So he's going to be able to use Liliana to kill the token and Anguished Unmaking.
Yeah,
that's not a bad line.
That's a pretty good situation. And so I think Rudy has 9 lands, so he just needs 4 types in his graveyard to cast the Emrakul, and Emrakul is likely going to be the end of this game.
Well, there is a Hangerback Walker for 3. Well, we have creatures, instant, sorcery, land, Planeswalker. So Emrakul does only cost 8 mana right now. And he's just going to plus the Liliana and pass the turn.
That's interesting.
Maybe we don't have a... Oh, yeah, there is a land in the graveyard.
Well, either way, I would guess that Rudy can't play Emrakul if he's choosing not to. He may be waiting for Osyp to overcommit into the board so that Rudy can fire off this Tragic Arrogance. But it looks like Osyp is kind of running out of gas.
All right, so Rudy's just going to plus the Liliana on the Hangerback Walker and pass the turn again. Hangerback Walker will level up to 4. And
is this a big Secure the Waste? Oh, Westfell Abbey, okay. Secure the Waste would have been really sweet there. That would have been like game almost. So it seems like Rudy probably can cast the Emrakul, and rather than just casting it and trying to kill Osyp on his next attack step, it seems like Rudy's trying to milk a little bit more value out of his Emrakul and is looking for Osyp to present a board that he can disrupt a little bit better. At least I think that's the reasoning.
All right, so Hangerback Walker is going to attack Liliana for 5. Or for 4. Oh, for 3 because of the -2/-1. And a grasp is going to kill it and give Osyp 4 tokens.
And because Rudy only has 8 lands, he might not actually have sorcery in his graveyard. Oh no, he had a transgress the mind earlier. Okay, never mind. Sorry.
All right, so Tragic Arrogance is going to happen.
Yeah, and Osyp has exactly 5 creatures, so he can sacrifice them all to the Ormondal, and he only has 1 left. So this could be a situation where Osyp might actually steal this game. We really need to see an answer to this Ormondal, and Emrakul might not actually be able to race it. So it'll be interesting to see here if Osyp chooses to attack the Liliana or decides to just attack Rudy. He'd be able to put Rudy on a potential 2-turn clock.
Right, so Ormondal is going to attack Rudy for 10. Nissa Vastwood Seer is going to minus and put a counter onto the Ormondal. It looks like Osyp might have a Declaration in Stone in hand. Liliana is going to minus.
Yes, this is a pretty interesting scenario. We've been able to see both of these decks do their big, powerful things. We've seen Bruno, we've seen Ormondal. We haven't seen Avacyn flip, but we've been able to see Tragic Arrogance. And it looks like Rudy makes Bruno, Osyp shows Declaration in Stone, and that's the match. Did Rudy get back Gisela with Bruno? They went through that kind of quickly. Either way, it looks like Osyp is going to take this match.
Well, Osyp is going to take the match. Green-white tokens over Rudy Briksza. Black-white Angel Control. Osyp is going to move on to 11-2, and Rudy's going to move on to 10-3. Both players are still extremely live for a top 8. What a pretty exciting match. I